Another thing I do sometimes just to kind of test is these bridges from StewMac. They're pretty accurate, I think, and I check them like that, and boy, this thing here is, it's got a little air in there, but boy, I mean very little. It's almost perfectly matched to the top. I mean, I don't use that as my gauge. I just carve them, you know, each time, and then I check it with this, and each time I'm amazed how close it is. And this is incredibly close. I do all those pencil marks. This is so I can put the gauze on the inside. This is so I can saw the hole out once I get the gauze on there. And this is just so I've got a good reference there where the brace actually goes. Go ahead and make the braces next, and we'll get those glued in place. Let's see what note this is. I think it's about an E flat to an E. Last time I checked it anyway. So let's see if we can kind of tell that here. Maybe you can see it on the meter here. We'll zoom in on this. Well, that's saying a B flat, but that's not at all where it was before. Let me see, do I have it turned on correctly? Let me double check. Make sure that it's set correctly. Let me turn it around here where I can see it. Well, there, I don't know, it's weird. It's really jumping around. Right there it's saying a G sharp. There's an A, there's a B, C, an E flat. It's like all over the space. Before it was a real steady E flat. I don't know why it's changed now, unless it's the tuner itself. There's the E flat right there. There's the B flat, E flat. I don't know. It's bouncing between E flat and B flat. Isn't that weird? I don't know for sure. I'm going to say E flat is what I kind of think it is. I don't know, it's really hard to say. My ear is not that perfect, but the tone is really good on this. It's really loud and clear. I've got these braces cut and they're pretty close to fitting, but I can see light through them still, so what I'm going to do is go to the carbon paper. What I do is lay the carbon paper right on the edge of where I want it, and then just lightly rub it back and forth in that spot, and then that shows you where the high spots are. You carve off the high spots and pretty soon you're there. You have to do that 2 or 3 times. I think I've used this piece of carbon paper on this edge before, so it's maybe running out of carbon here. Now we're getting it a little further across it, so that automatically tells you you're a little better than you were. We're pretty close. I'm going to look at it now and just see how far off it is. This is the treble bar. Wow, when I hold it up to the light, it's pretty good. There's a couple little spots I see. What I'm going to try is taking some sandpaper. Here's some 220. I'll lay it right on the edge there. Get my piece right where it's supposed to be. And just work it ever so slightly. That ought to be getting it pretty close. Well, I still see light, so we're going to go back to the carbon paper. I'm going to cut the edge off of this carbon paper first. I really like these things fitting just airtight. You could glue it on there right now and it would be fine, I'm sure, but I just like them as tight as I can get them. You can see the black is pretty much over the whole thing. When I cut these off this time, it ought to be pretty darn close. Wow, that's really close. I still can just barely see some light through there, so we'll try it again with the carbon paper. Cutting off just the least little bit that I can cut off. And now I'm going to take the sandpaper, put it on there, and sand it a little bit. I think we're good. Wow, I don't see even a hair of light coming through it now. Well, actually I do. There's one little bitty tiny place, but it's not enough to worry about. I mean, it's so tiny it's not even funny. So that looks really good. I'm going to call that one done. That's the treble one. Here's the bass bar. It's just a hair thicker, a little bit thicker. Just for the record, this is 225 thousandths. This one is 200 thousandths. That's the way I did it. If you divide those numbers by 40, you'll have your millimeters. Try the carbon paper on this now and see what it looks like. It's got to be pretty close. Got a few high spots. I ought to be getting pretty close on this one now. Wow, that's pretty darn good. I'll put the sandpaper on here and give it once over with that, and I think we might be good enough. Look at it for light one more time, and if it's... Wow, that's pretty darn good. I see one little bitty tiny spot, about like the other one. It's not much at all. Give it one more spot with this. I believe that's going to do it. Yeah, that looks fine. That looks real good. Alright, we're going to glue those in place. There's what she looks like with the clamps on her. We'll let that set a few hours, and then we'll put the gauze on here. Let it set overnight.
My whole life, no more corporate strife. Put your alarm clock away in the drawer. No more conference calls, and no meetings in the halls, and no business to conduct in a bar, and no self-serving boss, nor the threat of the loss of the paycheck that I've earned 8 to 5. 'Cause I'll be out on that ranch where I can reach the first branch of that corporate tree grown from on high. I don't own it, I just manage its worth. It's a small slice of heaven placed down here on earth. Care for his trees, water his sun. I don't own it, I just rent.
We're going to glue on the gauze and let it set overnight. Well, that'll do. And till tomorrow then. We'll clean up this, take the little planer and cut all these little edges off and stuff and clean it up, but that works just fine like that.
It from God. I tell them I'm history, that's okay, for I've got a plan. And there'll be no regret, no hard feelings, no debt. We're all doing the best we can. So here is my last word, some may think it absurd.
It's very awkward doing that because it's so thin, and I do have a fine blade in here, but it's still just, you know, you're always right on the edge of breaking something. So I feel like I'm about as awkward as socks on a rooster when I'm doing that. We got her done. We got one more to go. As you can see, I got them cut out. Now I have to do all the detail, and this actually takes longer than you would think. I file it out to the line, but I'm also looking for symmetry between the two sides to try to keep them looking the same.
But I know that someday you'll find it's better to leave than to stay and to grieve. Instead of a paycheck, you'll have peace of mind. I don't want it to just manage its worth. It's a small slice of heaven placed down here on earth. I care for his trees, I water his sun. I don't want it to just read it from God.
Well, you can see I've got all the weight on this top. This stuff's heavy. I mean, it's all solid steel, with it maybe the exception of this piece. I think it may be brass and steel. But other than that, it's pretty much solid steel, so it's all very heavy stuff. It seems to be holding it just fine, no problem. This is the heaviest piece, and it's pretty darn heavy. No question about it. But anyway, that gives you some idea of how strong a top like that is. I'll let that set that way for about an hour so that glue has a chance to set up real good, and then we'll take that weight off of there. I have carefully laid out the lines where I need to cut out for this neck, and I'm getting ready to go cut that out right now. So we're about ready to put the neck in this baby. We're all set up to cut the joint in this. This is the one with the high pucker factor here. So here we go.
Manage its worth. It's a small.
I believe that ought to work. So now we can bust this right out of here. Matter of fact, it should just break off, although it's not for some reason. Man, that's a tough one. Usually they just break right off. There they go. Well, that's a very strong one, I have to admit, but we'll clean all that out and start fitting up the neck. I've been doing a lot of fitting up on this neck off camera. Got it almost there. It fits actually pretty snug, like you can actually hold the mandolin by the neck, but it's still got some work to go. And what I do is I just take a little piece of carbon paper and stick it in there like that, and then rub this down on there and work it around a little bit. And then wherever the dark spots are, those are the high spots, and you can just cut those off. Very conservatively cut them off. You don't want to go crazy. And then I just do the same thing on both sides. I've been checking for alignment all the way through the process, so if I see it going off to one side or another, I work on the opposite side to get it where it needs to go. And there you can see quite a bit of black on that one there, I think. It has to be cut out. The more black there is, actually, it's kind of better, because that means you're getting very close to a full fit. Then it kind of goes the opposite way. Then once you really get a full fit, you don't get much rub off. It's kind of funny how that works. Got to be getting very close. And we're only about a 1/16 from going to the bottom now. It's actually working very well. I'm going to scrape off the blue that comes off of the carbon paper that wears off on this to keep it clean and fitting closer. It's getting tight. It's really fitting very well. I'm going to make sure that it's running down the center. It was the last time I checked it. You gotta force it together like that and let it set very carefully. It doesn't really like to set that way. And then you just kind of go down the center line and look and see if your neck's still on center at the end, and it is, so it's working very well. Okay, so we just got a little bit more to go. I'm not going to show it on camera because it just takes so much time to make that last a little bit. That's all I'm doing. I just keep working those high spots down and checking alignment. I've got my neck fitting just real well. Alignment, everything fits perfectly, so it's time to quit thinking about it and just put it together. So here we go. What I'll do is put the neck in there, squish it around pretty good, and make sure it's covered in glue pretty well too. Don't want to take no chances at this point. I fit it in there as tight as I can get it and squeeze it as tight as I can get it by hand. We'll take out as much of this extra glue squeeze out as possible. The alignment on this is absolutely perfect. It just couldn't be any better, I don't think. I'm going to set this on here. I don't have a good way to clamp this, and I'm just going to set this on there to keep the neck, to keep the body pulled down on the neck, and I think that'll work just fine. It's good and heavy. I've got a special bridge made underneath here, so the top is actually sitting on a like a bridge, and so this is not putting any extra stress on that body or anything. So anyway, it looks good. I'm going to let it sit there for a few hours and then we'll let it set overnight. I've drilled the holes in here. These are little 1/8 inch holes for some small dowels that I'm going to put in here. That helps lock the neck in where it won't ever pull out. Put a little bit of glue on the dowel itself. And then we'll just tap it in place. And you can pretty much tell when it hits the bottom. I'm putting one on this side and two on the other side, mainly because the one I wasn't too sure about after I put it on there. It didn't seem like it lined up that well, so I decided to put another one on this one. You try to split the difference right in that seam so that it all goes together really well. And we'll put a little glue on the dowel itself. This should really keep it from ever pulling out. Okay, and we're going to do one more on this one just because. Well, those aren't going to go anywhere, I don't think. Here I am once again with a hard piece of maple that doesn't want to be carved. And yet I've got my little tool here, and that's what I have to do, is carve it. So you can see I've already routed it around here with the router, and I've knocked it down with the grinder. So it's just a matter of finishing it up by hand, and it ain't no easy project, I'll tell you that. In fact, I'll probably start with the palm plane here. It's definitely puts a lot less stress on your fingers. Well, I'm not going to show all of that because that would take forever, but I will show you what it looks like when I get the top of it finished. I suppose I'm going to call that done for the outside of it for now. I almost always carve more on the outside after I start carving the inside, but the inside hasn't been touched yet. But it feels real nice, got a nice shape to it. I think everything's just about right on it. So we'll get started carving the inside.
Of heaven placed down here on earth, care for his trees, I water his son, and don't own it, I just rent it from God.
There's a lot of noise going on in the shop right now, but anyway, you can see I've got little dots all over this, and those are where I have critical measurements. They're not necessarily the critical points in a top necessarily. Oh, this pretty much is around here, but you know, it just gives me a good place for reference. And then I can put my calipers on here and see how thick it is and those spots, and I can go by my drawing that I have and then just compare that, and so I can get it, you know, get it down to the right thickness. So like right there, it's quite a bit thicker than I want. So what I can do is just cut in a few directions here, cut that way down in that spot until I get it down to where I want it. And then measure it again. It's much closer, but it still needs to go a little bit. Go a little more yet, and that's probably close enough for now. The scraping will get it the last little bit. So, you know, I kind of do that all over at all those spots, and then I just blend everything together. That's how I do it. Well, that's about as nice as I can do. It's worked out really nice. Weighs about, my standard is about 188 grams, and this one seems to be just a hair heavier than that, about 190 grams. But I'm running out of places to take wood off. It feels like it's just about there. I keep finding little tiny little lumpy things in the wood, and I just scrape them off with the scraper until I don't feel them anymore. So we're just about there. The next thing I have to do is carve the rose in the back, which is always a tedious proposition, but we're ready to get started on that, I believe. Well, I believe that's got it all traced out. Let's take a look and see if we see anything missing here before we take the carbon off. Looks good to me. Pull it off of there. So that's what she looks like before I carve it. Here we go.
I was a rover, unlanded on sea, till the good Lord's love made a new man out of me. Life had no meaning, it was all incomplete.
It's hard to keep that in your camera and keep it close enough, so I'm just going to let that be good enough. I've carved around here and here. I leave the design sticking up is what it amounts to.
Woman's love put me back on my feet. Instead of roaming, I go home in the evening and she's waiting there. She'll always care. And when the night falls and the moon shines above, I'm a man with a dream and a good woman's love.
On this Massachusetts Mandolin, I have the binding slots all cut, the majority of them, that is. All of the other places have to be hand done, like in these corners, router bit just can't get in there. Same way up here, you can see there's a little nub left. And then all the way from about right here, all the way around inside, and all of that has to be hand done. I do it freehand with this. I don't necessarily recommend you try this on your first mandolin. You might want to practice first, but I'll show you my techniques. one of the comments I saw was, "You made that look easy. I thought I could do it. I couldn't." That was his comment, or something to that effect. Well, here's my technique. You must get things stable. It doesn't hurt to have giant hands. And of course, this is a fairly heavy one. You could use a flexible shaft. I prefer this. I have a flexible shaft router, but I actually prefer this. It fits my hand good. I like it. And I feel like I got more flexibility with this than I do with the flexible shaft, personally. The flexible shaft seems too stiff to me. But regardless, that's everybody's personal preference. But the technique is basically the same. You have to have your hand rested on something. So I pull the carpet over the edge of the table here. I rest my hand on it. I lay the instrument there. And then I've got pretty darn good pencil-like control. And I just pencil it off. And it's more like you're erasing the wood than cutting the wood. And that is really the secret of it. I use this particular one because this is about the same width as the binding. So I can kind of look at the edge of this and see when I get about that deep, then I know I'm deep enough. So I just, it's a combination of a lot of things and lots of experience. In a place like this, it's especially tough because there's no prior groove there at all, and you're doing ingrain. And if you watch, I start out at the outside edge with the cutter and I slowly work my way into depth. Depth meaning that way, going, like the width of the binding. So I'm going down that direction into the hole from the outside in. And I'm also going deeper for the thickness of the binding as well. But I do it very slowly because it's very difficult in this area.
She'll always care. And when the night falls and the moon shines above, I'm a man.
Making the truss rod for the instrument right now. You can see I've got the hole routed out here. I've made the truss rod already. This nut is soldered on this end up here, and then it's threaded on this other end. It comes out straight for a short distance, and then it's got a long slow curve, and it will go in here like so. And this little piece is just a filler piece to go underneath it like so, and that's going to get glued in first. That also helps to keep it from pull this direction, but keeps that shape. So anyway, I'm going to put a little glue on this. Doesn't take a lot of glue for something like this, and I don't want to get a big glue mess going, so not going to put too much on it, just enough to kind of stick it in place.
The dream and a good woman's love.
That way I get the glue out of there. And then the piece should still fit in there just fine. It does. And now we need to make the filler piece for the top of it. I don't really know exactly how I want to do that, but I think I'm just going to start right about here. And so this piece here, this top piece will go above it. And I've got it long enough that it can go up underneath here too, hopefully. So we'll cut that out. I've got this fitting in there really nice. It fits nice and snug underneath the veneer and everything, and it matches the end of this. So it's time to glue it in place. I'm only going to put glue on the sides on this, and very sparingly, because I don't want it to get down on the rod itself. I could probably put a little bit under the veneer here. Kind of sticking on me there. It's not going where it went before. That's kind of weird. It's not, it didn't have any problem going in there the other time, but it's not going in there now. That's good enough. It'll work. So we'll just put a few clamps on that. I think I'll put one all the way on this. That should work. That's got her down in there. Now I'm probably going to have to cut a little bit more out underneath this screw. I can see that it's down in there fairly tight. It's going to take quite a bit more than that. That fits on there just fine. Don't know if there's quite enough room to get the wrench on it, but it should be pretty close. Just about there. Just a little tweaking and we got it made, I think. I believe that ought to do. Let me get a washer. Well, I put that on there without having the camera on, but that seems to work just fine. Get the wrench in there. Just barely enough room, but there is enough room. So we'll let that set up and move on.
In the sunlight, that black car shoe shine. It reminds me of our better time. Back to a time our love was new, when all my days are filled with dreams of you. Lonely evenings that I spend at home, still keep your picture by my telephone. Oh, what I'd give if that old phone would ring, to hear your voice and all the joy it brings.
Well, that didn't fit as good as I thought it was going to fit. In my test piece, it fit perfectly flush. In this, it's sticking out quite a bit. That would be a lot of scraping, and it would thin the binding down a lot. I can't win sometimes. I'm going to just take it back off, I guess. I thought it was plenty deep, but it's not. So I got to do that all over. It's not easy being me. Well, that's what she looks like the second go around. It fits much better. It's nice and flush now, and it's even better on the height because I took it just a hair deeper that way too. So it fits better. A lot of extra work. You know, you have to go all the way back around the whole thing, and then you also have to use the, you know, the areas that have to be done by hand have to be redone. So what a pain, but I guess it was worth it. I just put some reference lines across there. It doesn't really matter. I know it sounds crazy that it doesn't matter. It's to kind of keep me square is mainly what they're for. And I'm going to do it by eye as far as how far down I go and everything. I just kind of look at it and decide that I'm far enough or not. I'm going to use this new tool provided by Colin. It seems to be one of the easiest ways to knock this off flat.
All my dreams have a bitter end. We're always in our cars and leave again. We're not lovers now, we're only friends. I wished I'd loved you more back then.
Now that looks pretty good. I'll straighten this up a little bit by hand, and then I'll get some plastic and glue it on here. This canopy glue is really good stuff for gluing things on like this. It sticks really quick. It tacks up very fast. Doesn't take long for it to adhere. I don't feel like you need to do anything more than that right there if you got a good mating surface, and those surfaces do mate up really well. I'm going to work on this one while that one's curing. I'll just go ahead and mark the length on this one. Ready to put this one on now. It's amazing how fast this glue tacks up and sticks. You really don't have to hold it very long at all. We will give it about an hour though to cure and before we go any further. Maybe a little longer than that even. Hard to believe that's going to work out into a point, isn't it? I have no idea whether it's StewMac or maybe the company that StewMac is buying from, but everybody, and I've noticed this on quite a few products, especially like wood products where you're making something out of them, everybody keeps cheapening and shortening and shrinking and etc. This is the same pattern I've used since day one, so 30 some years been using this same pattern. I lay it on here now and you notice it sticks off the end here. Everything, you know, they just keep cheapening it and shortening it and, you know, just to save material. Now, on one hand, you know, this is a scarce resource, so I understand that to a certain degree. But on the other hand, it just is what it is. What I'm going to do while other parts are drying is I'm going to find the center of this. That's what I like to work off on the fretboard, is the center line. Okay, so we got 1951 and a half. So 1.951 divided by 2 works out to 0.9755. So let's find that. 0.975. That's close enough. And then I just take and scratch right here so I know where the center is. I put a little mark there, and then you go from the other side and you put a little mark, and then put a little pencil mark in that mark, and now you know you're in dead center. Maybe twist it back and forth, maybe you can see the little pencil mark right there. And now we do the other end. Now, you know, you can't assume they're the same width. More than likely they're not. Not that a thousandth or two is going to make any difference. This end is 1.956, so about the same. Pretty close. So 978 is the center. 0.978. Really hard to dial in that last thousandth of an inch, but you can see you can do it if you try hard enough. I might just give a plug for these eye gauging tools. You see the little brand right there, eye gauging. Every tool I bought that has that brand on it has been a very good tool, and to me they're reasonably priced. Now some of you may get sticker shock on these even, but you know, if you really want a quality tool, and man, you can feel the difference. I mean, I've been buying my calipers from Grizzly, and they're good, don't get me wrong. I think they're fine. They're cheap tools. They're in the $20 range to $30 range. This is closer to the $50 to $60 range, I believe. But man, can you feel the difference in your hand. You just feel it. I mean, it's got some weight to it. It's smooth. It operates so smooth compared to the other ones. It just is a quality tool. So, you know, and without breaking the bank. I mean, you can go buy Starrett and Brown and Sharp, of course, but you're going to pay about 3 times that for those. I'll tell you, I like these eye gauging. It's my new standard right now. Pretty much everything I buy in tools like this is probably going to have the eye gauging brand on it. I really am that impressed with them. Well, that didn't mark very well, so I'm going to try that again. Okay, so now we center on that mark there and the center on this mark here. Just trying to double check to make sure I got it just right. Looks real good. I'll just mark the beginning and the end on this and use a straight edge. And I'll do the same here and here. But on this part, I just go ahead and mark it because this is kind of a designer by eye thing anyway. That's pretty good. And then we can just put a straight edge on here and mark the rest of it. Okay, and this is a little bit oversized, so we'll cut it down for that for right now though to get it started, and then we'll do some fine work on that afterwards. But we are losing some length here, so we'll have to kind of round this out a little bit more. Here we go.
On the weekends when you bring the kids by, as you leave I hide the tears.
By the way, I didn't mention that this is an actual radius fingerboard. I do get a lot of questions about radius fingerboards. A lot of folks don't understand what they are, and it just means that there's a hump this direction. It's curved this way. There's a radius, and if you were to draw this out, it would be a very large radius. Probably, I think on this it's a 12-inch radius, so that would be a 24-inch circle. It's not a huge curve, but it is curved. Now we are going to shape this all by freehand here, and we'll move over to the sanders for that. The first sander we're using is this disc sander to round off this.
I'm always happy to see our children, but I wished I'd loved you more back then. And on the Sundays when I take the kids home, I see your shadow in the door alone. I try to fight it, but my lips say your name. My mind knows better, but my heart's to blame.
And as you can see, I've straightened off these edges. I can still see the faintest pencil mark on there, so I know I haven't gone too small. And that pencil mark was my good straight edge too, to reference everything. Now we'll go over to the spindle sander and we'll clean up this area.